Thank you for joining us for our annual Point-in-Time training. I am Amber Freeman, the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator with the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. So we have a very informative training for you today, but before we begin, I just want to go over some housekeeping. So because this is a webinar, you all are all muted, but you can type in any questions that you have at any point during the training in the questions box, and we'll be sure to answer the questions at the end of the training. We understand there's probably going to be a good amount of questions, so hopefully we can actually answer those questions for you throughout the training. Also, this recording is, being that this recording is a webinar, the recording as well as the slides will be available in our webinar library on our website at www.cceh.org. When you go to our website, you can go to the resource tab and you will see webinars, and the slides as well as the recording will be on there before the end of the week. So for today's training, we have Linda Casey, who is the Director of HMIS and Strategic Analysis with CCEH. And we also have Jim Bombasi, who is the VP of Operations at Nutmeg Consulting. So I am actually going to hand it over to Linda so she can begin the training for today.
Thank you so much, Amber, and happy 2021 to everyone. Let's get my camera in order here. All right, I'm going to start sharing my screens. We are so glad everyone is with us with this training, and we hope it's informative. It's going to be really interesting to talk about the new PIT 2021 as it relates, because of COVID, we've made some changes that HUD has allowed. And we hope that you will find these changes to be really simple. We want this to be probably the simplest PIT that we've had so far, and we'll walk you through every step of the way. So who should be at this call today? If you're a regional coordinator, if you are a PATH or street outreach worker, if you are an emergency shelter or seasonal shelter provider, this training is really targeted for you. And the assumption here is that you have HMIS access, because we'll be talking through, Jim will be walking through the new program that we have set up in HMIS to capture, if you don't already have an outreach program, how to capture those folks. If you know of folks who are not HMIS users, but who may know and need to record who unsheltered people are, I'm going to give you at the end of this presentation a little taste of what that new form is going to look like for those folks, and we're going to have a more detailed training on Tuesday, January 19th at 11 a.m. So just again, this training is focused on folks who have HMIS access, if you're one of those categories, and we will have a separate training that goes in depth for those who are not HMIS users and how to help out with the PIT unsheltered training. So our agenda for today, we'll talk about the PIT. The assumption here is probably everyone is probably familiar with what this is, but we'll go just real quickly to cover that. And we'll talk about the sheltered versus unsheltered counts for this year. What's different because of COVID? I know that many of you probably already attended the high-level training that I did about 5 different times in the past few weeks, but we'll go into that as well. And I know there's been a lot of confusion about beds, cots, mats, or chairs. I feel like saying lions, tigers, bears, oh my. I know there's a lot of confusion around that, so hopefully we'll get your questions answered. That is going to probably require more detailed discussion, so I'd like folks, as you have questions and any topic that we cover today, please enter them in the chat as we go along, because if we do run out of time, we're going to make sure that every single one of those questions is answered. We are preparing an FAQ that will be given to everyone, and you can have all your questions at least answered there if they're not covered on this webinar. All right, and we'll talk about, again, those who have HMIS access, what that new program looks like, as well as those who don't have HMIS access, I'll just touch on that, on how to capture the unsheltered. I'm also going to talk roles and responsibilities. So I have a slide for every single one of the users who are really involved in this year's PIT, and literally give you a checklist of things that you should do. So not a whole lot more than what you're currently doing, but this is going to at least give you some checklists to really understand what is expected. And then we'll have the demo of both the PIT unsheltered program, and again, as we have time, I'll just do a quick demo of the unsheltered program for non-HMIS users. And we'll have time for questions. So that's the plan for today. Buckle up, we are excited for all these discussions. So to start off, what is the point-in-time count? As many of you know, it's a federally mandated count of the number of people experiencing homelessness across the country. It is mandated by Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and it usually occurs between in one night rather, on the last 10 days of January. And those are typically the coldest days of the year. So this really gives us a sense as a country of how folks are really understanding how many people are experiencing homelessness. If you are unsheltered in the coldest days of the year, that's what we're after here. So again, this includes people both in emergency shelters as well as those who are unsheltered or in places not meant for habitation. And again, the PIT really provides a nationwide snapshot of homelessness at the same time each year and really helps us as a country to understand trends in this particular population. So COVID-19 has changed our lives in so many ways, and PIT 2021 is no different. Here are some highlights of why and how we are making changes. So instead of using volunteers, as you know, for the past several years, there are, we had 600 volunteers go out in the streets of Connecticut last year. Because of COVID, we can't do that. So we've opted to leverage our year-round HMIS and about the non-HMIS data. So anybody who can understand who is experiencing unsheltered homelessness, we're going to be using data to capture that. So you can see the theme here is really data and data quality. We are going to be leveraging our professional path and street outreach staff, the folks probably on this call, and we're not using sampling or waiting as we did in the past. This is truly going to be reporting on the data that we have and really making sure that that year-round data is as accurate as possible. The PIT this year is going to be on Tuesday, January 26th. That's the night that we are actually doing the count. One thing that is different this year is also we're going to have a 2-week time frame, 14 days, to make sure that the data is cleaned and all tidied up. So when we do our poll for what happened on the 26th, we'll have 2 weeks afterwards to make sure that data is clean. Everyone on this call will have 2 weeks after to make sure that data is clean. As we mentioned, there are going to be some non-HMIS users who are going to be part of the system. We know they currently are out there. There could be soup kitchens, there could be other folks in the field who are working with this population. And we're also going to start pulling in as a year-round strategy municipalities across the state. So working with towns and cities that currently don't have a role in helping end homelessness, but who certainly can help us with what previously we relied on from our sampling technologies and our sampling methodologies rather. So again, longer term strategy, we really want to have this be year round and include people across the state. So the new PIT Unsheltered program in HMIS is going to be used for those who don't have a dedicated street outreach or path program. There's also going to be an online or paper form for non-HMIS users. The focus here that we're going to talk a lot about today is really increasing awareness among our regional coordinators, or RCs, and outreach teams in each CAN, so really get to make sure that they get connected. And as you may know, there is not going to be a youth count. In past years, there was a week-long youth count that followed the PIT count. That's not happening this year. So again, this really summarizes the changes that we're going to see because of COVID. So we'll start out with the sheltered count, and really there's no methodology changes. We are doing everything that we did last year for the sheltered count. So folks who are in emergency shelters, the only difference being you have some folks probably in hotels this year. So again, from a methodology, nothing's different, but we are going to have a separate PIT database entry. So if you are using a hotel or a motel and a shelter, we just need to know how many people were in each one. I have the link here to the PIT database, so you can pop in. I know folks probably on this call have been entering in their bed counts already. That was done in the fall of last year. If you go into that portal and you do not see your hotel listed, there's Nutmeg's help desk. Let them know. That means that we don't know that you're using a specific hotel, and we need to be able to enter that into the PIT database so that you can enter how many folks slept there for the night of the PIT on the 26th. If you are a visual person, I wanted to include a couple flow charts here, just again, making sure folks are aware. So if you are an emergency shelter or an overflow shelter, make sure your guests, this is nothing new, this is what you've been doing all along since COVID started, make sure your guests have an open emergency shelter enrollment in HMIS. And if you have a guest who is, the question next is, if you have a guest who's in a hotel or motel, if you do not, just make sure that if you're using your shelters, that you enter your check-in, your bed nights, for each of these slept in the shelters, and make sure that's entered in HMIS, because on the night of PIT, we're going to count all those people. If you are using hotels, I know that Smart Sheets has been, and we're working with the Department of Housing to work through a transition plan, but we know Smart Sheets are how you're tracking that. please, please, please make sure that all the guest data is up to date on the smart sheets, that it's accurate and complete. And if folks are no longer in that hotel, make sure there's an exit date listed on there, as well as all the other information that you are capturing on those smart sheets. So we are requesting, if you're using hotel data in smart sheets, make sure that data is up to date, because we're going to be pulling that data from smart sheets into HMIS after the PIT. And again, on the night of PIT, we're having that total count using the data that's in the system. So I'm going to pause here. I put this slide in about the beds, cots, mats, and chairs in between before I get to the unsheltered methodology, because this is really the transition. And I want to spend some time on this slide because I know there's a lot of questions, a lot of confusions, and there's a lot of nuances between how this is handled. And I think that folks can realize too that this year is going to be as nuanced as it has been in the past. Nothing's different. I want to say nothing's different about what's happening, except for the fact that you as a shelter provider are going to be in charge of how you're counting it. You're not going to have volunteers come in and wondering, did they count the people who are in my overflow shelter or my seasonal shelter as unsheltered? You're not going to have that question anymore because you're in charge of that. You're giving us the data. So in general, and I know I'm going to circle back on this a few times, but if you are in overflow shelter or an emergency shelter and possibly a seasonal shelter, right? And if you enter into the PIT database and you operate as a shelter and you have beds, cots, or mats, and the thing here is there's no chairs involved, then you probably are counting those people as sheltered. You're treating them as sheltered clients and guests in your shelters. So that's kind of like a high level, trying to make this as simple as possible. The question becomes, well, who counts as unsheltered? So typically, if you don't enter into the PIT database, and you could use chairs or mats. I mean, you again, either of those. But the key here is you don't consider yourself a year-round shelter. You don't operate according to what HUD defines as a shelter, and you typically don't count your people as sheltered in the PIT database. You're probably going to count those folks as unsheltered. I'm going to pause there. I know there's a lot of probably questions that are going to come around this with very specific circumstances, and we will address every single one of those. But I just wanted to pause here and say, hopefully this will give some clarity to what has been just a constant question about this question of mats particularly. If they have a mat, does that mean they're definitely sheltered? And if they're in a seasonal shelter, are they unsheltered? It really depends on how you operate as a shelter in terms of how you consider those guests. So I know the questions are coming at the end, but I just wanted to get to that as a transition to the next slide, which is really talking about our unsheltered count. And as we said, this is really where the changes are happening. So the only change that are happening is that we're going to have a new program. If you are an HMIS user, meaning you probably have a path outreach, a path enrollment, or you have a street outreach program that you currently use, keep using it. And here's the thing, make sure that it's up to date. If you're an HMIS user and you don't have a current path or a street outreach program, and we've heard anecdotally that this is actually the case across the state, we have an option for you. We have a new PIT Unsheltered program that Jim's going to walk through. It's really, again, the idea here is meant to be as simple as possible. We don't want to burden you, but we also need to get the data elements to report to HUD that we are on the hook for. So again, giving everyone options. Keep doing what you're doing in path and street outreach, open enrollments. Make sure that data is clean and good, and everyone who's in there is still active and open, and those who have moved on, make sure that we close them out. And if you don't have that, we have a new PIT Unsheltered program. And again, if you're a seasonal shelter, some people call them mooring centers. If you have open enrollments, just confirm who is there on the 26th. So that's really what we need for people who are in the HMIS system. If you're not, as I mentioned before, we've got a paper form that we are going to post on both of our website and the CTHMIS website. And we also have this online web application, which is very exciting, very cool. So that's really, again, simple, simple, simple. There's not a whole lot changing here for methodology. You notice there's no sampling, there's no weighting. It's really using our existing enrollments. So this is, again, if you prefer diagrams, you may have seen this in some of the other presentations I've given, but really it comes down to, you find an unsheltered person, do you have access to HMIS? If you don't, you can drop to paper, or if you prefer, you can online form. This online form will be available even if you don't have internet access. This will actually act very similar to a mobile app in that regard. And if you use paper, just scan it and email it to data@cch.org. If you use the online form, there's going to be a separate portal that we'll be able to, again, talk through training and how you get access to that data. If you do have HMIS access, just to review, if you have PAC funding, use your PATH program. If you have street outreach program, use your street outreach program. If you have ESG street outreach, use the new ESG street outreach program. And if you don't have any of those, use our new PIT outreach program. So hopefully that makes it just super clear that we are just helping get the data into the system. We're not changing anything. All right, the next section talks about roles and responsibilities, and I've broken these down by each type of work. So we'll start with the PATH workers. So if you are a PATH worker, here's your checklist. Continue to enter everybody who's unsheltered into your PATH project. If they're not eligible, or if you don't know yet if they're eligible, you can enter them into your PATH project as a contact, okay? And as a last resort, if for whatever reason those are not working for you or available to you, you can use the new PIT Unsheltered project in HMIS to enter all the people. The key with PATH folks, and this is part of, I know what they do on a daily basis, but this is going to be particularly important because of the PIT count, is to really make sure that everybody that you have as an open enrollment has their current living situation field updated. Are they still unsheltered? It's really the whole point of what we want. Obviously, the bigger concern is we want to have the data accurate year-round, but what we're asking for this particular PIT count is to make sure that current living situation is actually updated. They still, in fact, are unsheltered. Here's the thing, you're going to see this on every single slide coming up. Get to know your regional coordinator, get to know who they are, what their name is, and ask them filtered questions through them, because you're going to be contacting them at the end of this whole PIT process and potentially moving forward as the year goes on with any questions. So there is, at the end of this presentation, I do have a list of the current regional coordinators that we have listed, that have made themselves aware to us. And so you'll have that list available to you, but they may not know who you are. So definitely make that connection. We can help if there's questions about even where to start, reach out to us here at CCH, and you can certainly make those introductions for you. Ensure all of your data, as we talked about, is up to date 14 days after the PIT. That puts us at February 10th. And again, your responsibility is just to confirm with that RC, with that regional coordinator, that all your data is up to date on February 10th or the 11th, whatever we can finish, and just let us know if there's any exceptions. So this can be as simple as, yep, all of my current open enrollments are in fact validated. I have updated the current living situation for every single open enrollment that I have. I'm good. Or I entered a couple of new people in the new PIT Unsheltered project. Just let us know, are you done? Is the data clean? And we'll be able to pull the data with confidence. So that's your job, PATH workers. Again, if you have questions, I do want to say that there will be, after PIT, again, PIT came on us pretty fast. We had to wait a long time for HUD guidance. But I do want folks to know that we understand, and I've had several conversations with some really wonderful folks who are in this field using the PATH enrollments, and we really want to make this a priority for the next year, this year, I can't believe we're in this year, to really see how we can streamline. We can't change how many required fields HUD asks for, but we can do our best to make the data entry piece more streamlined and better, and make it work for you folks. So please know that is on the horizon for our roadmap, but it's not going to be done in time for PIT. So keep using what you are used to using, and know that that is something that we are going to take a very earnest and hard look at to make your PATH enrollments better. Okay, if you are street outreach, keep using your existing street outreach project in HMIS. And if you don't have one, if you do outreach, you may not be called a street outreach staff, but if you do outreach, you can use, again, our new PIT Unsheltered project in HMIS. Same thing for you folks. Ensure that every existing enrollment that you have, that you've maybe entered up till now, is up to date. Make sure, are they still, should these people still be open enrollments? Are they still unsheltered? Have you verified that? Same things I mentioned. Get to know your RC, filter any questions through them, make sure that your data is all good by February 10th, that you've reviewed it and this is in fact up to date. And just again, same thing for the last two are going to be similar for every role. Confirm your data is up to date with your RC on February 10th, and let us know of any exceptions, because they're going to be communicating that with us. Emergency overflow shelter providers, a little bit more here, just confirming everybody, this is nothing new. This is what you're doing now. This is just put as a checklist form. Ensure that everybody, every current client is enrolled in an ES project. And if the client is physically sleeping in the shelter, not in a hotel, enter the bed night count for each night. If you're using hotels, I'm sorry I'm repeating this, but this is just so important. If you're using hotels, motels, please, please, please make sure your Smartsheet data is up to date. And you can also, in case folks have forgotten, we have on our website ways to get a short video on how to use the HMIS to do the hotel enrollments. If that is, if you were unaware of that, there's a recording on our website on how to do that. So there's a lot of options too, but we need the hotel data completely up to date. On the night of PIT, count anyone in bed counts or mats as sheltered in the PIT database. Again, we'll talk about the subtleties of that. And anybody who's in a hotel or motel in the PIT database, they're going to be separate entries for those who slept in the hotels and motels on the night of PIT. Same thing, know your RC, filter any questions through them. The one step you have, nothing new, you've been doing this for years, and we'll have more information on this. It's just really verifying who is chronically homeless for PIT. That's part of your sheltered tasks because you have shelters. And again, 14 days to make sure all your data is accurate. Any enrollments, should they be closed? And confirm with your RC that everybody, all the data is up to date, or let us know of any exceptions on the 10th of February. Seasonal shelter providers, make sure everybody has an open enrollment. Same thing, broken record, get to know your RC on the night of PIT, confirm which guests were in your seasonal shelter. You can choose. I understand there's going to be probably some questions around this. Completely understand, and we've heard you that, hey, sometimes for seasonal shelters or warming centers, you might have a lot of people coming in and you just don't have the time or bandwidth to enter all these people into HMIS. Hopefully the PIT Unsheltered program is going to be something that you will be able to do. We just ask for basic information. You can put a lot of data not collected if that's what you need to do, but if you can get, again, basic demographic, name, age, just some basic information, that would help us out greatly. If you can't, I'm hoping this is not the case, but if you can't, work with us because we understand that there are ways we can get that information from you if you have a spreadsheet that you prefer to send us, what have you. So again, my point here is seasonal shelters, we want you to enter into HMIS. We want you to be able to have the PIT Unsheltered program available to you to enter the basic information and make sure that the data is up to date again on February 10th. And finally, last but certainly not least, are RCs. Flipping the tables around, get to know who your outreach workers are. This is a little bit harder if you don't know, because again, there's a smaller number of RCs, but a larger number of outreach workers. So please, again, we can help, we can do some assistance there from CCH. Get to know who the outreach workers are in your area. And again, assist them with any questions. Your job is to communicate that all path and outreach data should be up to date for the PIT. The same information that you're hearing now, nothing more, nothing less. And again, you can guide them to the PIT Unsheltered program. If someone didn't attend this program and if they're not sure they have their own program, guide them to that, show them where that is. And then again, just confirm all the data is up to date by February 10th and send us the information to data@cch.org. That's going to be the website that you're going to send everything to. Let us know if there's any exceptions. So before I pass it over to Jim for the demo, I just want to have a couple things that I want to highlight before he jumps into that. So right now, our PIT Unsheltered project that you're about to see looks, and like every other system that you've probably seen, we just wanted to make one that was not fund or tithe and can actually have this place, a bucket to put all these folks into, that we can then figure out where they should go. But right now, we've made it, we want to make this as open as possible. Right now, the user roles that have access to this are going to be emergency shelter, path and outreach. We can certainly expand that as we hear if there's needs for a CAN worker or any other user role. Let us know. We want this to be as open as possible. And again, this is really the option for people who don't have a current dedicated outreach program to enter anybody they need who's unsheltered. This mirrors the standard enrollment, basic demographic, and disabling conditions. And again, we know because it's a copy of the HUD assessment, you're going to have sections that make no sense for what we're looking for here for just the PIT, such as the financial assessment or the health insurance section. So you can enter data not collected for anything that doesn't make sense or that you don't have, you're not looking to do a full enrollment here. Anybody who's entered this program, the goal is they're eventually going to be transferred and copy the assessment into another outreach or path program if that's where they should go. So again, this is kind of like a safe holding place for folks to get into the system so we know about them and ultimately so that they get help. This is not a data exercise for data. I want to just remind everyone, and probably I'm preaching to the choir here, the reason we do this is because we want to help these folks, and we can't help them if their data is not in the system. So I want to make sure that the pressure, like, this is not about data for data's sake. It's about getting the data accurate so we can actually help these folks get on their feet and get the services they need. So again, if you keep that in mind, which I'm sure everyone on this call does, I just want to make sure that that's really what we're caring about. The PIT is one way we have to do that because we're mandated, but really keep in mind and really focus on the fact that you want to get the data in because that's how they will get help. And finally, everything that you're going to see today is going to be on both our website, cch.org, and cthmis.com. So with that, I will transfer it over to Jim, and then if there's time, I will do a quick, if folks are interested, I can do a quick demo of what the website looks like for the folks who will not have HMIS access, and what that web page looks like. So Jim, take it away.
And I'm unmuted, that would help too. Okay, can everybody see my screen? You should see HMIS up on the screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Yep, you guys can see it? Okay, great. All right, so thank you, Linda. And obviously that was a lot of stuff. And I think for a lot of you veteran PIT count folks out there, I know some of that is stuff that you're familiar with. But certainly either CCH or NutMeg are here to answer questions, especially after this is done, if anybody has any. So as Linda described, we've created this PIT unsheltered, essentially program that will allow users to enroll a client who is essentially unsheltered, and you know, whether it's a path contact that is not path eligible that you traditionally would put on a spreadsheet somewhere, well, now you can actually enter them here, and you won't have to run into all the same questions that you would deal with a path. And then for any outreach or any other unsheltered folks who you would not enter in your traditional program, this is the place you can add them. And we can get a glimpse of, or at least a good idea of what that unsheltered population looks like. What it'll be for you up on the top right of your screen, let me just move this out of the way, is you'll see that there's you'll have access to a new organization under your username called PIT 2021 Unsheltered Count, the provider, PIT 2021 Unsheltered Count. And we are going to give you the role, DOH Emergency Solutions, if you don't already have it. That's the one we would recommend for it. But as Linda said, if you have a path role, an outreach role, or the emergency shelter role, that will work as well. But if you do have the DOH Emergency Solutions, that would be the one to go with. And for those of you, again, you're HMIS users, so the mechanics are going to be the same as what you're used to. You have your client that you want to add to this new unsheltered program. You would just come over to Enroll Client. And it's just going to move a little bit slower just because I'm doing a screen share here and I'm in the support site. There we go. All right. Okay. And you can do the first name, last name, or if you already know the client ID, you can certainly do that. For this case, I have my client's ID number that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to use that, 25214. And same step, check for duplicates. So if the client is found in the system, that's fine. Go ahead and click on them. If for some reason your client has never been in the system, that's when you would use this as a new client. That will hopefully be rare, but if it happens, that's what you'll select. But if the system finds your person, please make sure to select them to keep the duplication down. Because what we will be doing, as Linda also alluded to, is that if there's an actual program that the client belongs in, like a street outreach or a path program, we can then migrate that data over to that enrollment. So if the system finds your person, as always, it'll auto-populate all the known information, and you can feel free to edit. If this is somebody who is living on the streets, obviously unsheltered, and you want to have some contact information, so you can recontact that person at a later date. Obviously, you have these sections as well where you can put in cell phone information or phone information to reach out to that person. Okay, but once you're confident that this data is correct, you can just hit save. And this is going to follow the same fields that those of you who are regular HMIS users are accustomed to. The next one is going to be that family member edit screen. If you do want to add other family members, you certainly can. But ultimately, if this is a single, then you won't have to worry about adding anybody here. If you were going to do that step, you would just click add row, and then you would update the family member information. And the support site is moving a little bit slow. There we go. That finally came up. I apologize. I'm actually there's 3 of us online at home today with distance learning. So, okay. So here would be is if you're going to add that family member, again, first name, last name, check for duplicates. If the system finds the family member, you can add them. But certainly if there are no family members, you don't have to worry about this step. Just go ahead and hit save, and I'm going to consider this person to be a single and just hit save. Now, when you get to the release of information screen, you will have to identify if the person has signed the release. So just you will need to make sure that you have that. So that would be the release that, again, all of you are used to using. And just if you, for some reason, don't have the release, then you won't be able to get past this page. So if you say, client refused to sign, then you won't be able to complete the enrollment. If you have a client who's refused to sign the release, you can enter them as anonymous. And we'll go back through that after we're done with this. I'll just show you quickly how to do the anonymous enrollment if you have somebody who refused to sign the release at the onset. But in this case, if you're at this stage, it's because the person has signed the release. And this would be your program enrollment screen. And this will all coincide with the PIT unsheltered program. So it'll auto-populate your provider for you. And then you just have to select the PIT unsheltered program from the dropdown, which will be here. And then the start date of this enrollment, which I'll just make for today. And then you're done there. And you've added them to this program. And this will launch into, it might help if I put 2021 there. My first 2021 error. I knew it would happen sooner or later. So be aware of that, obviously, that if you are enrolling people that you are putting in 2021, because you will get an error if you try to enter somebody as 2020. Or as a 1-1, the enrollment will allow somebody like December 2020, that would be fine, but it wouldn't allow somebody from a year ago to be entered at this point for this program. All right, so now it's just letting you know that this is the person that's going to be enrolled. If you had other family members here, this is where you would be able to check them as well if you wanted them added to the enrollment. But again, in this case, the person's a single, and I'll just hit save. Okay, so this is the first series of PIT unsheltered specific questions. The traditional HUD workflow will come into play as well. And as you can see, the system knows that this particular client I have already exists. So you can say yes to copying assessments, and that will bring in, you'll have the option to then select any assessments or the assessment you want to copy. Because this is an entry, you would only want to select an entry assessment, okay? Now, for my particular client, the only history here is 211, so I'm not going to get a lot of data from that, and in this case, I'm going to cancel. But if you had other enrollments here, like emergency shelter or outreach, things like that, you could go ahead and select them and copy over the entry data. That will help populate your HUD Universal, HUD Program, HUD Financial. Again, it's not going to be something that you have to do. You can always say data not collected for those. But if the system finds it, it will populate it for you. But because it's just 2-on-1 in this case, I'm just going to cancel because that's not going to give me very much. So the new or the questions that are specific to PIT Unsheltered are here. Are you homeless because of COVID? How long have you been in the community? So these are, it's a free form, so you can identify, you could say like 4 here, and then you can say if this is days, months, or weeks, or years, so we'll just say 4 months, so you can see how that works. So the numeric value, and then the period of what you're talking about. You're talking 4 days, 4 months, 4 weeks, 4 years. Which coordinated access region are you in, and you can identify that. And then the location, you can put, whatever information that makes sense, by Dunkin' Donuts, something like that. And then you can put the cross street, Main and First, something along those lines. Anything that will help describe where the person was located. And then town where the person was found. All the towns in Connecticut are here. So if it's New Britain, you just start typing New Britain, and that'll come up for you. And then once you've filled that out, just hit save. And for live, obviously live moves much quicker than the support site that I'm in now. But it's usually not that slow. There we go. So this is the traditional HUD universal form that you're used to seeing. And you'll just fill this out best you can. If you don't know, as Linda said, you can use data not collected. Client location is just going to be your PIT provider that you have here, and that will call up here for you on this table. And you'll just select it. It'll populate it therefore because it's the only one to select from, so it'll grab it for you. Disabling condition, I'll just say no for this case. If you didn't know, you could say data not collected, client refused, or client doesn't know. Where you found the person, so in this case, if they're truly on the street, then place not meant for habitation. If they are willing to give you the length of time, you can identify that. If they can give you the date that their homelessness started, you can go ahead and identify that. And then any other information they're willing to provide. But if not, you can always say data not collected or refused. Once you've completed that, you can hit save and move on. Okay. And then you're getting to the HUD program data. If you have the information, fine. If not, then just data not collected. And if you have the disabling condition info, then again, if you don't, otherwise it can be data not collected, or you can provide the data if you have it. And then hit save. The nice thing is if the system does find this client with another enrollment type like emergency shelter or another outreach, it'll call up all this data for you, so you can just save. After you confirm it, you can save past each screen. And that's it, and you're all set from there. At the bottom right, you can see you have a print option or done. The print option would just be to allow you to print all the data that you've entered, and then obviously done closes it out for you. Okay. And from there, you're all set. You've enrolled the person into the PIT Unsheltered program. Case management And program enrollment will bring you to the enrollment table if you want to see the enrollment that you created. It'll show you that client's entire history as well. So you can see, here's my PIT unsheltered, and then you can see where else this person has been. But ultimately, you're at this point, you've entered the person in and you've done what you need to do. And then after PIT is done, we will be looking at this data to see if the client you enrolled had any other enrollment history or is currently enrolled in another program, which would mean then that the person may have been in shelter on the night of the PIT. We'll take a look at that. But essentially your steps here are, as far as you're concerned, you've done everything that you're needing to do. All right. And that's it. Looks like a question did pop up there.
Yes, we had some questions that came through and about release of information as well as some others.
Yeah. So yeah, let me share my screen quick again so we can talk about the ROI situation. So before you start the enrollment, make sure you have a completed ROI, that the person said yes to the ROI. If the person said no, but you can still get basic information on that person, you can still enroll them, but just enroll them as anonymous. And to enroll somebody as anonymous, all you need to do is where it says full name reported, click this drop down and put client refused. And it will create an anonymous record for you. All right, and then all you have to do for date of birth is say, you can say client refused there. For SSN, client refused. And then if you want to provide the rest of the information, you can certainly do that. If you are able to discern gender, or if they've identified for you their gender choice, then you can provide that. If not, you can always say client refused there as well. Same rules apply for race and ethnicity. If they identify for you their race and their ethnicity, then go ahead and add it. Otherwise, again, you have the options for data not collected or client refused. So the key here is if the person has refused to sign the release, it doesn't mean you can't add them. It just means you can add them as anonymous, and you can use this name data quality feature. Just set it to client refused, and that will start off the anonymous process for you. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying. And I think Linda has a little bit more, so I'm going to hand it back over to Linda, and then we'll follow up with additional questions.
Thank you, Amber. And I'll just show my screen. Just again, I'll spend a few minutes on this. I really would like to get to folks' questions, but just to give you a little taste of the online form that we're going to make available to folks who do not have access to unsheltered, to the HMIS to enter unsheltered. It really is fascinating because you can actually do everything you can do on this web form that you can do on a mobile app. There's a lot of benefits to it that will be apparent once you see it. You can cache data, so you don't need internet to connect while using this. There's a geotagging feature, so you can. A lot of folks have asked for the ability, which you can do. We're all used to doing on our mobile apps, being able to find location just by clicking a button and being able to track where that is and have that saved as part of the client record. And we also have that question just came about the ROI. Because we're modeling this after the surveys that were collected in past years from volunteers for the unsheltered, we've built this in at the end of this survey. So folks, we can get the data collected and then give the folks the option to say, hey, do you want to be part of our HMIS system? And then we can capture the data at that point. So without further ado, let me just share my screen. And hopefully you can see this now. And this is, again, this will resolve on any mobile device. I'm looking at it right now on a web browser, but you can see here, you will need to register. The only thing is you will need to register in order to use this, just so we know that it's not just anybody who has a link to this can enter data, but rather people will be able to understand who's entering this unsheltered data that's going to come in for this year-round effort that we have. And I'm just going to just scroll through just to show you how easy this is, multi-select for a race. Again, all these options are available to you, and again, how you click and enter. And I just want to quickly flip back to my presentation slides here, just to show you what this looks like on a mobile app. So I just took some screens from my phone. So you can see, again, really nice resolution, really going to make it very simple, very easy for folks to enter data if they do not have HMIS access. So again, I don't want to spend much time on this. We'll go in depth on the 19th of January, but I did want to just at least present that to you. As I mentioned, the list of RCs is going to be at the end of this presentation that you will all be able to get a copy of. So again, as you get to know who the RCs are, that is the list available to you. And right now, I want to see if there are any questions. I do see that one came in about, does a warming center count as unsheltered? I knew this is going to be a good discussion, so I'm really glad you asked that. So as we talked about, and I can actually flip back to that, well, the bottom line here is that, does your warming center function as a shelter that would be considered by HUD standards an operating shelter? And if the answer to that is yes, then that probably means you enter into the PIT database. That probably means that you open up emergency shelter enrollments for that person. And as long as you're not letting them sleep on chairs, beds, cots, and mats, that's fine. You would count as a sheltered, that warming center, those people in there would count as a sheltered person, if that is your situation. If you're a warming center that is open, that doesn't necessarily consider, they're providing perhaps a place for that person to be on a cold night, but you're really not considering yourself a true shelter that's really going to be carrying that person through to case management or to more services, and you're just open for that one night and that person may come and go, you may not even track them, and that's unsheltered. And you would count them as part of your unsheltered count. So I'll pause there. Does that answer your question? I guess I'll wait for the chat box to get populated. But if that doesn't, and if there's more that you'd like to ask, feel free to put it into that chat. And I know Amber will let us know when those questions are coming in.
Yeah, she actually said yes, that did answer her question. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions?
Yes, we have another question for the PIT unsheltered program, when should they enroll them and discharge them?
So you can enroll them. The program is live now. Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but that program is actually live now. So that.
Yeah, we just have to do the user assignments because that's going to have to be automated because I'm guessing there's probably a lot of people out there that we'll have to assign. So instead of doing it manually, we're going to have to do that programmatically.
Okay, we were hoping to do it by user roles though, not by individual users. So that way it broadens the ability of who can access that.
Well, no, you have to assign the program, the user to the program so they see it under their username.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
so ETA on that. So I think we would like to include everybody who's currently on this phone call. If you got the, we can share the list of who was invited to this call.
Yep.
And we'll start with that. And if you don't see it, if anyone on the call, if your colleagues do not see it and they should be seeing it, just send help to get to know.
Yeah, you'll be looking for, when we get that list, you'll be looking for it under your username. You'll be looking for that org. So right now, nobody has that. So when we do get that assigned to the people on this call, you'll see under your username, you'll have the PIT Unsheltered 2021 org.
And the second part of that question was, when do you exit them out? So the first question is, soon you'll be able to get that information in the program, and it won't be until after February 10th that you can then reassess where they should be going, because February 10th, remember, that's that 14-day window to get from the date of PIT, from Tuesday, January 26th, 14 days out, puts us at February 10th. So don't do anything with that data until after February 10th. If you decide that you realize this person really should have a specific open outreach or PATH program, or should be assigned some other program, do it after February 10th. And we'll remind folks about that too.
Great, thank you. We have a question where someone's asking for a little bit of clarification when you mentioned earlier in the training that they should operate as a shelter. What exactly does that mean?
I will say that there is a 30-page document that Jim has shared with me about what HUD's requirements are. I was stunned. I had that same question, saying, what does it mean to operate as a shelter? In a nutshell, you are providing all the services, and Jim, feel free to jump in, because I know you probably know this in your sleep, but the nutshell is you are operating on a year-round basis. Your data is considered as part of all the HUD required reporting. You are careful about your data quality. You are part of those efforts that you see happening year-round to make sure your data is clean, because they are affecting the statewide numbers. And you are really considering that person to be, again, part of your system, that you will be providing services, carrying them through, not just having a one night or a couple nights during a cold night to provide a place for them to stay. So Jim, I'm sure you can add probably a lot more detail to that.
Yeah, so, and also think about who's funding you. If you're a DOH funded emergency shelter, then you're an emergency shelter. If you're privately funded, like for example, there's shelters out there like Bridgeport Rescue Mission, for example, and those types of shelters. So if you don't get direct funding from DOH or through the HUD ESG grant, you're privately funded. But again, I think Linda described it in pretty good detail with, if your location is designed to give people a place to sleep, you have beds, mats, or cots, and somebody can stay there all night. They can stay there for any length, for a particular term, whether it's 90 days or even longer than that. Then you're operating as an emergency shelter. But if you're just a place that somebody comes in out of the cold and you give them a chair and maybe coffee, and that's that, then you're more of a warming center. So that's probably the best way to think of yourselves. And if it's still not clear, you can go ahead and you can submit a help desk ticket, because it's very possible that if we know what agency you're with, we can tell you what at least the system has you set up as. The other way to know is if your program is on the housing inventory for the night of the pit count, that means you're most likely an emergency shelter and have been considered an emergency shelter for quite a while at this point.
All right, great. So for those that have several outreach projects that are actually services only and not necessarily street outreach programs, will they be included?
No, and that's one of the things that again, I'm certainly learning how this whole process works. If you have someone who's unsheltered and they're only enrolled in a services only project, we're not picking those folks up as part of our unsheltered count, because they may not be unsheltered. So there's no way that we're picking that project type up as part of our reporting. So this is why we're asking you, can you please get those folks, if you know people who are unsheltered and are enrolled in another project, as you mentioned, services only, support services only, get them into that PIT unsheltered project if you do not have an existing outreach project to get them into. If you think about this, at the end of the day, at the end of February 10th, what our goal is to say we have confirmation from everybody who's been entering and capturing unsheltered people throughout the year, and be able to have confirmation that they have looked at all of those enrollments, that they are in fact open if they should be open, the current living situation is accurate, if they're path workers, if they still are unsheltered, and just make sure that they're really as clean as can be, because we're going to be pulling a report on path and street outreach and this new PIT unsheltered project to confirm who's unsheltered. If you have people that you know who are unsheltered, who are enrolled in anything but those three projects, we're not going to know about them. We're not going to pick them up. And that is possible that each may have done something a little bit different. They may have had, they created their own projects because, and no criticism, I'm sure it worked for them. But when you think about, and if we use this as a pilot to potentially do this moving forward for future PITs, to really rely on our data, we really have to think now strategically about making sure that we are in alignment in terms of what projects we are entering unsheltered folks in. It's okay if you keep them in the SSO project. Just make sure that for the purposes of PIT, and again, we'll figure all the kinks after we get through this first PIT using data only, but the ask is please make sure that you enter them into one of those three projects: PATH, Street Outreach, or any other outreach program that you have available to you, and if you don't, into the new PIT Unsheltered project. That way we're going to pull them into the report and make sure that they get captured in the count.
Okay, so I think that may answer the next question, but I'm going to read it just in case I'm wrong. If a client is in a hotel under a shelter enrollment versus in a hold under a seasonal program, are those treated differently?
If they're in a hotel and they are part of a shelter program, they're going to count as sheltered, and the shelter provider is going to enter them, that count separately in the PIT database, and we'll be able to track them again. So they're sheltered, whether they're in a hotel. The only difference is if they're not sleeping in the physical shelter that is sponsoring that hotel, there's not going to be nightly bed counts. But we want to know how many people slept in that shelter. I think that might answer your question. I'm not sure there was a second part of that. I apologize. You might have to repeat the second part.
Okay, 1 second. Let me scroll back up. It is, will they be treated differently?
If you're using, okay, yeah, thank you. If you're using your hotel as a warming center, so again, everything we just talked about in terms of that defining of how do you consider your space? Are you, as Jim said too, are you thinking about this as this is kind of like just temporary for the warming center, kind of giving them shelter, but you're really not considering, again, operating as a shelter for HUD, then they would be considered unsheltered. If that's what your program is really all about. If you have them, again, as part of full-blown emergency shelter enrollment, you're considering them as sheltered, you're carrying them through as you would with any other client who is in shelter, they're sheltered.
Yeah, most likely if they're in a hotel or motel, those funds are being paid for, the hotel motel are being paid for through funds, either through the CARES Act funds or some other emergency services funds. So I would say 99.9% of the time that person is part of an emergency shelter and they're sheltered or would be counted sheltered.
Great, thank you. Another question, will there be a guide for the HMIS PIT enrollment for non-PATH SO programs?
Yeah, there's a screen-by-screen guide showing you, each page and what to do.
And we'll post that on both the CT HMIS website as well as the CCH website.
All right, and just a little bit more clarification, is a seasonal cold weather program considered unsheltered?
I can start that one and Linda can probably put the bow on it. So if you're a seasonal shelter and you are most likely on the housing inventory for PIT. Seasonal shelter is a specific term, meaning you're open usually from the beginning of November to the end of March to early April. So it's a specific funding source, and you have beds and people come in and stay and then they go. And I think Linda touched on this a bit too. It's probably a much more rapid pace than a typical emergency shelter, but if you're a seasonal shelter and you have beds at your facility, you're funded to be a seasonal shelter, open during a particular window of time from the fall to early spring, then you're an emergency shelter. And I think, Linda, you did allude, though, that a caveat to that may be that this PIT unsheltered program, maybe I might misquote you, so I don't want to do that, but if I recall, you did indicate that if there was some challenges with getting people in and out under the emergency shelter enrollment because it's a little bit more complex, that this might be an alternative for a seasonal shelter or cold weather type shelter? Or do we want them to, if they have the seasonal shelter program in HMIS, we want to make sure that you still use that seasonal shelter program in HMIS?
So that's great clarification. So here's the thing. If you have an HMIS open enrollment, and my understanding, if this is correct, is a lot of seasonal shelters open an enrollment at the beginning when the person first comes, and they don't, it stays open for the season. And that person may come and go and they may enter the bed night counts. What we're asking is, if you, again, just for the night of PIT, can you just open up an unsheltered, the PIT Unsheltered program for the folks who are in there that night? Because we can get a little bit more data on them and really confirm, versus just saying, hey, we know there was an open enrollment for a handful of people or however many people you have. For the shelter for the season, we'll be able to know exactly who was there with some additional data for the night of PIT.
Yeah, and most seasonal shelters are in the PIT database. So they'll have entered bed info and they'll have entered their population count info into the PIT database. And they, again, probably have a program in HMIS where they're also entering the individual client information from the time they open until the time they close in the spring. So we might get some overlap of people who look sheltered in those seasonal environments, but then are also looking unsheltered if they're in the PIT Unsheltered program. Now we can handle that scenario by doing a comparison. So we can say, okay, here are the number of people who are enrolled in the PIT Unsheltered program. And these, clients also have, for example, a seasonal shelter enrollment at some seasonal shelter that's also in HMIS. So we can handle that duplication. I just want to make sure that so the notion is to use the PIT Unsheltered enrollment for those seasonal shelters.
Yeah, and that would avoid the duplication. So if we know that everybody who has a seasonal shelter just copied their assessment into a PIT Unsheltered, we can pull that data and not have any question that we'd have to do that deduplication. Because again, the seasonal shelter enrollments typically, as I understand, are open for the season. So if we have anybody who was really there on the night of the PIT into the PIT Unsheltered program, then we're not having duplication because we're not pulling the seasonal shelter enrollments as part of that overall count.
Yeah, right. But their seasonal shelters counts as sheltered, though. I guess that's where I just want to make sure.
If it's, again, so this is the thing, if they're sheltered, then nothing changes. If you consider yourself unsheltered, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So seasonal shelters with that, so if you're on the housing inventory chart, you're considered, if you're a seasonal shelter on the housing inventory, then you're considered an emergency shelter, and you would not use this PIT Unsheltered program. Is the best way to clarify that. If you're a seasonal shelter and you're not on the housing inventory, I would say submit a help desk ticket and then let Linda and I probably hash that out and get back to you on it. That might be the alternative for that.
Great, thank you. And we have many questions, and I know we're gonna follow up and send out a frequently asked questions along with the slides and the recording, just in case we don't get to answer all of this, because I see we are at the end of our hour. But I'm just going to take a few more. So we have a few people asking about their outcomes, and if they enter individuals into their regular street outreach program and then discharge them back to homelessness after February 10th, they're concerned if that would affect their outcome. They also have a street outreach program, but they'll prefer to enter them into their Point-in-Time outreach program. Is that okay?
Let me just unpack that. So they are in a street outreach program and they want to discharge them back into homelessness. I guess my question is, why would you do that? Why wouldn't they stay in your street outreach program?
Yeah, I think that might have just be just a slight misunderstanding of the directions. So if you're a traditional street outreach program and you're enrolling people as Linda described as normal, you would not exit them from your street outreach program on February 10th, because that's a separate deadline. That does not pertain to traditional programs. So that February 10th deadline does not go along with your PATH program, your street outreach program, your emergency shelter program. So you would treat your client in your street outreach program no differently than you're treating them today. You would exit them whenever it's appropriate to do so. And so the other thing to that was if at all costs, use your street outreach program versus the PIT unsheltered program. Again, if you're a path funded program, the advantage is you have less data entry to do. If you're a traditional street outreach program, there's really not a lot different, with the street outreach program and the PIT unsheltered workflow. But I'll let Linda tell me differently if I misspoke on that one.
Yeah, I just want to go back to this slide. So the key here, and just to make sure this is super crystal clear, if you have a current way to capture unsheltered people, whether you are path funded, whether you have an outreach program in HMIS or the new ESG outreach program, use those. That's the first course of action. Use those, use those, use those. Use what you have currently available to you and keep them open. Think of these as, again, think of this year's PIT as really not changing anything the way you do. The only thing is we're offering more options for people who may know about unsheltered people who don't currently have a program. So if you have PATH, if you have street outreach in any flavor, you keep using those programs, make sure they're open if people are still unsheltered on the night of PIT, and keep using them as you would at any other time of the year. The only time the new PIT outreach comes in is if you don't have that. If you have access to HMIS, but you just do not have access to any of these, like for whatever reason, and I don't know what that would be, then we have it available to you. So it's meant to be super, super easy. So I hope that clarifies it, that you would not close out a street outreach program that you had open and transfer that data into PIT outreach. Not at all. We're going to pull all the open path, all the open street outreach programs, all the open ESG street outreach programs, and anybody who is not using those will pull in the PIT street outreach, the PIT outreach programs. Does that clarify that? So do not close out. If you have an open street outreach or open path, keep them. That's great. Keep doing what you do. It's for anybody who doesn't have those programs accessible. For whatever reason, we've got a new program available to you.
All right.
And just confirmation, did that answer that question for that person?
Let's see. That person says that they only enroll those who we offer case management to.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming that may be PATH.
PATH, yeah.
Yeah, so here, oh, Jim, sorry, let me just finish up. So here's what just a couple conversations that I've had and what I've learned, so bear with me. My understanding is if you have a PATH, if you are funded by DEMAS and have a PATH program available to you, you should enter everybody that you meet who's unsheltered into that PATH program, understanding that not everybody is going to be PATH eligible. But my understanding from talking to folks who know this a lot better than I do is that you still enter the PATH and into your PATH program. Anybody that you find who's unsheltered, they may become, and I think I put this in the slides here, they will become a contact. Here we go. If they're eligible, they will become a contact in your PATH project. So at the end of the day, you may not know if that person's PATH eligible, but you still have a way to get them into the PATH project as a contact. That you have made contact with this person, don't know yet if they're going to qualify, but you still got them captured as a contact. So that's how my understanding is. Again, if I'm going to caveat this. This is supposed to be simple, guys. It's supposed to be simple. If for whatever reason that is not working for you, and this is not the long-term solution, you can use the new PATH unsheltered project in HMIS, but just know that at some point after February 10th, that person's probably going to make it back into your PATH project. So if for, again, I'm not going to elaborate on why you might want to do that, but you have that option available to you for this year's PIT. You can enter them. If you choose for whatever reason not to enter into your PATH, you can use the new PIT unsheltered, but know that after February 10th, you have to probably copy that assessment back into your PATH program. They're going to have to live, they can't live in the PIT unsheltered if they're really meant to be a PATH contact. I hope that answers that.
Actually, I think she needs a little bit more clarification, but we are available for technical assistance, so we can reach out and maybe speak one-on-one for that.
That sounds wonderful, yeah. And our contact information is on the beginning of this deck, so when you get this, feel free to reach out, absolutely.
Okay, so we are at the end of our hour, and there's a good amount of questions that came through, but I think you all did a great job of answering the majority of them. If there are very specific questions that I see, we can follow up with you after this training. CCEH is also available for technical assistance, so if you need a little bit more assistance, we can have a conversation and try to provide additional support for you. I also see that there's a good amount of questions about the webinar recording as well as the training slides. If you were not here during the beginning of the webinar, those slides and the recording will be available on our website under our resource tab, and you can go to webinars. It'll be available by the end of this week. I'm going to shoot to have it done by tomorrow, but they'll be available on there. You can also find additional information on our website under the data tab for our point in time. There's tons of information there. But if you have any additional questions about this training, about the slides, about point in time, about technical assistance, please email me at training@cceh.org. If I am not available or able to answer your question, I will forward that to Linda or Jim or another individual on our team that can answer that for you. And we will also, I have the names of the individuals that asked questions that we did not get to, so I will follow up with all of you. So thank you all. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.